Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is January 16, 2024. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Also want to thank Experiments in Cinema. That's where I met Dane Berko. Dane, this is part two.
Benko.
Benko, I am so sorry. I've been making more and more typos. Speaking and writing in my old age, I have Benko. It's right in. Oh God, it's spelled wrong on the. Ugh, that is bad.
To be fair, I posted our last hour 30 to Substack notes, and I called you Jerry Fialco.
Oh my!
So
to get back, well, just tell me because I apologize. My typo rate. I have.
Well, we can just massage it like McLuhan.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you're not bitter about it. I.F. Stone says typos are worse than fascism.
I don't agree with that.
Well, we'll work on that and try
particularly because I used to be what was that called when you're a moderator and you're like grammar Nazi, and that didn't
grammar Nazi. Yikes! Oh my God!
You don't want to be a grammar Nazi
anymore. No, there are a few people when I make a typo, they kind of freak, but I apologize. Okay, so this is part two. 3 months ago, we did part one, and we covered a lot. And we were at this point where when you're making a film, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your viewer?
I think that I could always use better work at doing that. However, because I've been an editor for a while, I feel like I'm a little bit better about cutting down to get to the point a lot more. But in terms of like original inspiration and original stuff, I have never really had to worry about it because I put my ideas out there and then people seem to really go forward with them. The difficulty is finding the resources to get it made, but the ideas and the like stories and stuff people are usually really positive and responsive to. I haven't yet received enough negative criticism.
You mean to cause you to go, maybe I should think of my audience more?
Yeah. Haven't yet.
Well, I think Steve Martin loves the David Mamet quote about all art is made with the unconscious mind. Now, I could have that wrong too. He might say conscious mind, but how conscious are you in your making your art? We talked about intention last time. Kubrick says great art is when you can not see the intention of the maker. I mean, how much is your consciousness being conscious guiding your creative process?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who say something along the lines of you practice and practice until it becomes internalized and it becomes sort of reflexive.
Yeah.
I actually found that ended up happening with me because I kept trying to start a project, or like I'm developing, I'm practicing, blah blah blah, and then like next thing I knew, one day I was like, oh wait, I actually am making things. I'm just not recognizing them as making things. And really, at this point, it's the packaging that I need to be working on, and that's the like conscious element of it, to like choose to put it out there, choose to frame it, choose to tell people that it exists, which I'm not great at. But for instance, I just did a video recently that I called Myopic Tom, because it's the idea of peeping Tom, but if peeping Tom was semi-blind. The thing is I knew that I could do it in a quick time if I didn't think too much about it. I just like ran out on the streets and shot a little bit of footage and threw it on a timeline and, all that kind of stuff, which is all things that 10 years ago or 15 years ago would have taken me a lot of time and a lot of writing and a lot of thing, and then I would have probably had a lot of self-doubt, you know. So if I try to be conscious about it, I end up more putting hurdles in front of me instead of actually doing the thing.
Yeah, you're saying myopic Tom off of Michael Powell's Peeping Tom.
A little bit, yeah. The
Yeah,
concept of peeping Tom, yeah.
yeah. There are two things. Gary Player, the golfer, said the more you practice, the luckier you get. And then
Yeah,
there's a flyer I got when I worked for George Carlin. We actually got a flyer in the mail, and it says, "I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity."
yeah, exactly.
So McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness or human sensorium, like knife and fork extends our teeth,
Mhm.
shutter in a camera extends our eyelid, maybe even non-tangible like religion or philosophy extends consciousness. What does the moving image camera extend for you? Whether it's film or video, what humanness does it extend?
Our viscera.
How do you spell that?
Viscera.
Viscera, and tell me what that word is rooted in. Vision.
That's guts.
Oh, that's guts.
Yeah.
Is it Latin?
I don't know. Yeah.
Viscera. What a great word you taught me. That's, yeah, guts.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because my friend says that the three T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. So, technique, you learn it. Theory, you know the structure, and then taste. How does one acquire taste? Because that word right there
Yeah.
implies the gut or the
Yeah.
mouth, and similar to the gut. How does one acquire taste, whether it's in music or film or literature?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I really encourage people to acquire taste with conscientiously.
Yeah,
uh, what I because I didn't get into film until I watched weirder movies, movies that disturbed me and like upset me.
yeah,
Uh, because before then I wanted to be a writer, and I didn't feel like movies could get you inside of a person's mentality as
yeah,
well as a book. But then I watched some movies like Requiem for a Dream or Lost Highway,
yeah.
and they disturbed the shit out of me. And so then I started looking for disturbing movies, and the more I watched like disturbing and weird and dark and obscure and whatever, and then that just kept kind of digging me down and down underground into towards things like experimental cinema, cult cinema, etc. And so that's one way, is that you can literally develop taste simply from the approach of, this is something that I like, so where is there more of it?
Yeah,
And then also like, where does it belong, or how is it, what is the taxonomy of it, what's the genre? Can help, but of course with limitations, because genre is arbitrary. And then I think something that helped after a certain point is asking why you like something. And that comes up in horror a lot, actually. A lot of people are like, why do we even like horror? Why do you like watching something that makes you upset, or makes you feel bad or scares you? And for me, it's actually a way of managing anxiety,
yeah,
because you know that something bad's going to happen in the movie. So you just like, because you know it, you don't have to like worry about it happening. You know it's going to come, and then it happens. I end up laughing, and then that releases the anxiety, um, or other things like that. And then you probably also should back off at some point after you ask why you like things, and start accepting that sometimes things just grab your attention, and that they don't need a reason to. Um, so it's a little bit of I don't know if you know the midwit meme. There's a character on the left that has like a weird a character on the left that like looks like a dumbass, and then there's a character on the right that looks like a scholar with a robe and like a monk and is like enlightened. And in the very middle is the midwit, this guy with like a buzz cut and glasses who's like, no, you don't understand, this is how it works. And what happens in that meme structure is the person on the idiot on the left and the genius on the right have the same opinion, and the midwit has the one that is trying to bring the nuance in the conversation. So in that case, with taste, the idiot would be like, I just like it because I like it. And the scholar would be like, I just like it because I like it. And the midwit would be like, no, you have to research all of the background and understand all of the context and how all of these things relate to each other so that we can build a better culture out of all of the, you know, in a line.
That's good. That's the gap is where the action is, the midwet. It's like it's floating. That's good, because most people answer that by saying experience and exposure, and you really suss it out a lot more, because if it's gut, it's the word taste, and you get it from your gut. It is, a phenomenon because it's a hunch. It doesn't have to have reason and logic behind it. Well, I've studied the history of this genre and I know what is accepted as the good stuff. It's like guilty pleasures is another thing when you said cult cinema, because we're going to get into experimental film a little. That's where we met. But this is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Dane. Leonard Cohen said the only way you can sell a concert is to put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. So what role does risk play in your creative process?
Problem is I'm too much of a financial mind, and I always think of risk in terms of just losing money. I actually don't worry too much about risk in terms of like, I don't know, reputation, or because again, I've seen such weird and crazy stuff that I know that people out there make it, So
yeah,
for me, weirdly, most art doesn't have risk. It's actually kind of funny too, because there's a lot online that I don't like, where people say stuff like that, like, you have to take risks, you have to put yourself out there, you have to blah blah blah.
yeah.
And it's like, you guys never write or do or create anything. All you do is talk about that kind of thing over and over and over again, like, or lots of people worried about being canceled or whatever. But even when I've dealt with difficult topics and I've showed them to my peers, in a lot of cases, I either get the like, oh no, that's like a real thing, and so it has to be shown in art, or they are like, okay, well, so you don't understand how it is from this perspective, so just understand that, hear what I have to say about that, and then incorporate that, and then it works. I don't know. I don't. I'm not worried too much about how the art comes across. I am worried about losing all my money and then never being able to make anything again.
Well, it's funny because Viola Spolin kind of helped invent comedy improv. She worked as a social worker in Chicago, and she did role-playing exercises that led to the Groundlings, Saturday Night Live, and the whole comedy improv movement. And she said, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. What role does struggle play in your creative process?
I don't know. I don't know about that. For one thing, I'm not in love with the struggling artist motif.
Yeah.
And also, honestly, some of my experience in especially more narrative or commercial film is that a lot of the people who've struggled the least are the ones that have the most success, because, there was a thing I attended once in Scotland, in the Glasgow International Film Festival. They had the BBC there, and it was a panel discussion, right? And the panel discussion was called, "Is filmmaking upper middle class career?"
Wow.
The idea being that they were struggling, people in organizations such as the BBC were trying to create more diversity with bringing in more like lower class, poorer,
Yeah.
working class people. And in addition to the fact that they didn't have very many people there in the first place, they also just like they were trying to go into those communities and the communities weren't interested and they were wondering why. And I remember that like when I was first learning how to make films and stuff in New Mexico, there was some groups of people who were also learning and they were making stuff all the time. And I wanted to get part of that crew, and I was like asking them how they were doing it. And the thing is they all had like parents who were like, okay, listen, you got like 2-3 years, we'll pay your rent, we'll buy your cameras and your equipment and all that kind of stuff, make it work, and if it doesn't work, then you have to get a real career. But because they had 2 to 3 years and have to pay rent, that's plenty of time to like make all of your shorts and make your first feature and all that kind of stuff. And they all, went to LA and are making movies and all that kind of stuff, and they didn't struggle, so to speak. And the audience, one thing the audience reacts to that creates success is production value. And production value is nothing more than the money that you're able to put to make things look really, really good. And when something is successful that it is like low budget, usually that's discussed. Its success is discussed in how they were able to bring production value out of that like low budget. People tend not to like, especially if the sound quality is poor, or whatever. So yeah, struggle. I don't actually think the data aligns that the audience, a commercial audience, but then there are communities like experimental communities or stuff that like specifically exist in defiance of that and like look for the ways in which people are creative with less and all that kind of stuff. And so that's like a different industry, and then it has its own, they have their own ways of communicating to each other, their values and stuff. And one of them could be struggle, but I don't necessarily think that struggle is at the core of it.
It's interesting you said industry, because Phil Solomon, when I interviewed him with all these questions, he says, I'm a professional experimental filmmaker. I said, yeah, right. You teach, that's how you make your living. And you got shown at Sundance once. So, but when he died a couple of years ago, he did get a big obit in the New York Times. So it's like a lot of experimental filmmakers get their due, like this, the person contributed to the arts after they die in a New York Times obit. But you really anticipated this question. What are the services and disservices of marginalizing experimental film? When Jackson Pollock was on the cover of Life magazine in 1949, regular folks could start developing an aesthetic on experimental painting. There were no Bruce Conner or Maya Deren Life magazine covers. Generally, it's I call them rich art kids, privileged, entitled people who develop an avant-garde aesthetic and dominate the experimental film world. Any comment?
I mean, a lot of experimental filmmakers are just irascible contrarians in the first place. So there's no way that you can create a professionalized version of it. I'm sorry, not say professionalized, because I actually respect Phil Solomon's, outrage and that the way you framed it.
No, I love, I hope it didn't come off wrong. I love Phil Solomon's attitude, his films, and it was really beautiful. I think he sort of hijacked the interview and I never got a copy of it, but that's all right. I loved him dearly. I still love him, and I wanted to do workshops with him. But it's just, this, that most of these so-called experimental filmmakers exist. 80% of them exist by teaching, except the one in your part of this country, Reggio, who made, Godfrey Reggio. Yeah. He sold his footage to like American Express commercials. He sold it as stock footage. So, anyways, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Well, so imagine a world where the United States federal government decided that they were going to create an institution of experimental cinema. And they went to, I don't even know if Brian Konevsky would join in on that, but I think he'd try. But they went to Brian Konevsky. They went to the people that run, oh dear, what's it called? The place in Michigan.
Ann Arbor Film Festival.
Ann Arbor. Yeah, that's going to ding me for any experimentalists watching this. How did you know? Ann Arbor. You know, they went to all these different places. They went to the Anthology Film Archives and to Canyon Cinema. And and to Craig Baldwin, and they were like, listen, you guys are going to be on the board and you're going to like run this and make sure that this is like truly experimental stuff. We're going to provide the resources and all that kind of stuff. People will apply. Almost the day that institution was established, there would immediately be 1.5 million publications of manifestos about how nothing included in that institution counts as experimental cinema, and the real experimental cinema exists outside of that. You know, immediately people being like, "No, that's bullshit. This isn't real. This isn't the true culture of what we're doing," and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's funny you brought up Brian, because there was two things. Brian's the one who turned to me once in Ann Arbor and said, this looks like a Nike commercial. And it's like, well, I mean, I've gone to Ann Arbor 30 out of 60 years, and I've given 18 presentations there, but it is changed. And is it the films change, or has the world changed? You know, that's two things. Yeah, go ahead.
I was in an experiment. I went to an experimental festival in Belgrade.
Yeah.
And they had a real problem about once digital stuff was happening.
Yeah.
All of these like creative studios and ad studios were sending them stuff now that these studios would have never even paid attention to them before, but they were expending them because they were like, look, this is this experimental thing. We created a new code that creates weird flares that causes this thing, and we put it into a dance video where the dance like replicates itself and it has echoes and all that kind of stuff. And they were really struggling with it because they're like, it is technically experimental. It has its precedences and things like Norman McLaren and all that kind of stuff. Like, it wouldn't be off from what these old experimentalists did on film, but does it count because they don't really understand that we're like underground, right?
Yeah, and, well, I saw Norman McLaren and experimental films before mainstream features in the late 60s and early 70s in mainstream theaters, because their one little point is, Brian once said, maybe jokingly, but he says he gives his students lower grades if he catches them at mainstream films.
Yeah. But it is a joke. I was in a class when he said that, and my immediate thought was, but you would never know because you wouldn't be close enough to a cinema.
Yeah, what are you doing there? You got security cameras. But also one more little thing on Brian is one of his students was Steve-O, you know, who made a hugely successful mainstream film called Jackass series. And so, you know, what did he sacrifice to become a star in Jackass? And did his experimental film classes help him in the long run? So anyways, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, I was gonna say that the word that they kind of came to in that discussion in Serbia was designer. Designer films.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of just like, hey, we created new techniques and new codes and new processes to create new imagery. And the idea is that imagery will be implemented in commercial films. Ultimately, like that's the purpose. But for now, to show it off, here's the design.
Yeah. Huge. It's huge, Dane. What you touched on also is what my friend said. now films are film festival specific. They're made for film festivals.
I do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so here is McLuhan saying, now you okay, we did that. Okay, so McLuhan said there's no such thing as a good or bad film. It's a good or bad viewing experience. Any comment?
Yeah, I kind of agree on that. I have a great example of that actually, because it says nothing about whether the movie was good or bad.
Yeah.
I saw May December, Todd Haynes' new movie, at the IFC Center, and it was a nearly sold out show, and it was so fun because people would laugh at different times, but because it was an awkward movie and a lot of the humor was about the awkwardness, the people would start laughing and then they'd be like, oh, this isn't the part I'm supposed to laugh at. And the laughter would die. And then some other scene would happen, someone else would laugh. And then one scene would happen, like everyone would laugh and it would get them all up again. Like it would get the mood going towards laughter. And so everybody had their own little private like moment of just like being put on the spot of like, is this supposed to be funny? And it was one of the greatest experiences that.
And whether you judged it as a good or bad film, the film viewing became a living organism.
Exactly. And you know, I can't even say whether the movie was good or bad. I just enjoyed the hell out of the experience.
Yeah.
And
that's really good.
I can't even claim whether that was Todd Haynes' purpose or not, but you know, going back to the intent that we talked about, but either way it worked, you know? So yeah. I hope he'd be cool with that.
And I talk about Todd. If you watch his Bob Dylan film,
I have, yeah.
And you watch it with the talking commentary, or what do they call that? Director's commentary. That is as close as it gets, very close to what the Finnegan's Wake reading out loud with a group of people is like. Hearing him talk over that film, I really said, this is just like Finnegan's Wake. The other one is, if you ever read Zadie Smith, her review of Christian Marclay's film, The Clock, you know, the 24-hour film.
Mm-hmm.
Her review of The Clock is like Finnegan's Wake. It's very Wakean in its experience. Right. So Peter Greenaway said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers.
Oh, absolutely.
Are experimental filmmakers telling a story a different way or doing something completely different? And me and you watch Tony Conrad's The Flicker. It's not storytelling per se, but we could have a story go through our heads. So any comment on this?
No, I agree with that. I think every medium, painting, sculpture, whatever, they have its representative version and then they have their abstract version.
Yeah.
You know, poetry versus prose, lyrical music versus ambient music or instrumental music.
Yeah.
Sometimes people can tell stories and sometimes they can use it to express something else.
Yeah.
Which is why I get really kind of annoyed when people are like, the whole purpose is to tell a story. I'm like, no, a story is a really great way to make meaning. And it's a very elegant and quick and effective way to make meaning, but it isn't the only way to make meaning. It isn't the only purpose of things.
That's really good, Dane. You know, McLuhan also talks about D.W. Griffith carrying around a copy of Dickens in his back pocket, because basically the history of cinema is 130 years old and it's called filming theater. That's all it's done. And Peter Greenaway is the one who actually said, Marty Scorsese's not doing anything different D.W. Griffith did. They're both filming a theater. They're both filming a play. I mean, there's different blah, blah, blah. But that was good. So if you and me were starting the Ann Arbor Film Festival over 60 years ago with George Manupelli, would you want it to be more inclusive or more exclusive? Keep in mind, that a fraction of the films are animation, some are documentaries, but it's mainly experimental film. Chick Strand was starting Canyon Cinema the same time with Bruce Bailey. She told me that they were trying to recreate their 11-cent movie-going experience by showing a newsreel, a cartoon, and then an experimental film. Brackage came along and said, don't show that other stuff, just show experimental. So, you know, what would your tendency be? Be more inclusive or more exclusive?
I'd be more inclusive. I prefer trying to let everyone in if they can.
Yeah.
I'm actually open-minded to a fault. I'm the guy who will go into a museum and just be like, someone will be like, that's not art, and I'll be like, oh, it's art. It might be bad art, but it's, you know, that kind of thing, which is a disagreement I have sometimes, you know.
Well, that's Warhol and McLuhan both said art is anything you can get away with.
Yeah.
And so that my friends heard that and said, that sounds like Trump.
Well, there's, I don't know. Do you read, oh boy, hold on. I'm trying to think of both the column and the guy who writes it. It's actually a Bloomberg columnist. Matt, oh man. I'm
we'll find it, but he writes about culture for Bloomberg News.
He writes money thoughts or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Money something.
And what did he say?
He's a great writer. And at one point he was talking about how the art, because he's focused on finance, right?
Yeah.
But he a lot of the reporting that he does is really just about like the sense of humor you can have in finance, like the fact that there is actually jokes and stuff in finance, trolling and whatever. And so he gets stuck covering Elon Musk a lot, for instance. Right?
Yeah.
But at one point he was talking about some sort of art issue that had come up. Some people got sued by other people, whatever. And he was like, he said, you know, basically modern art became, he was talking about the fallout of NFTs and the values of NFTs. And he was like, basically for a while after art became non-representative and it was easier to make art, it really just became about the jokes, the practical jokes you could pull. And if you came up with a new and clever joke, then people would all have a laugh and then pay for your art because blah, blah, blah. But the problem is NFTs, you can make a practical joke. You can make, 30 million practical jokes per second.
Yeah.
And so now even, the bottom's fallen out from that aspect of modern art.
Well, that's, you just duct tape a banana to a wall, but that's because NFTs stand for no fucking thing. And, and no fucking thing. And that's like, oh yeah. And everybody goes, oh, that's horrible. It's like, no, not just get over it. That's what art is about, is taking on each new thing and subverting it or remaking it or doing something different with it than the norm. The punk magazine that spawned The Simpsons and everybody in LA was called Flipside. Now Flipside said, don't sell out, sneak in. And Schrader said another line that I love is, sometimes I love it, is the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out, but fail. Nice. So that one has a lot to it, because that's like, oh, my art is so pure and I have so much integrity that I tried to sell out, but I didn't make it. It's like, get over it,
Yeah, exactly. I never sold out. Yeah, I went ahead and looked it up because it was bothering me. It's Matt Levine.
How do you spell the last name? Levin?
Yeah, Levine. Matt
okay.
Levine.
Okay. Yeah.
He's great. I actually think you would genuinely enjoy his column.
I love to read though. I love to read.
He'll literally report things based off of like if it's funny or not. Like he'll be like, I could have reported on this, but this thing happened instead, and it's funnier. So we're going here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. I spoke with Michael Apted 40 years ago. I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? And this, most people don't know that Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it flourished in the 80s to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. Can we I asked this with a bias, can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
This is something that could probably be tested with actual meta-analysis and stuff about the average length of a cut. But I really think, I subjectively feel like that topped off in the 2000s, the aughts. Because from an editing perspective, you need something on frame for almost 2 seconds before it can really be taken in, unless you're purposefully trying to add content that goes by so fast that people can't see all of it. So you could like flash a ton of images and then people will only see some of them, and then each experience would be different. And that's one way to do it. But like if you're really trying to give information, you need to be somewhere between about 30 frames and 48 frames on the 20 frame per second. One way that you can cut that faster, if you're really like going in, is by using eye tracing. And what that is say there's an element that comes up, like say somebody shoots an arrow and they're down here in this corner and they shoot it and like the arrow is going this way. When you have a cut, whatever the thing you want the person to see, the audience to see, should be right there where the arrow is headed, so that their eyes are following the arrow, and when it cuts, it's already on the thing you want them to see, so that their eyes don't have to search around the frame. And that can help you cut it a little bit faster. And you can just keep then eye tracing around, the frame and guiding the eye where it needs to go, which the director Edgar Wright is fucking amazing at eye trace editing. Like your eye is always exactly where in frame it needs to be to see the next image, like every single time through the entire movie. And he's incredibly good at it. And
this is, he makes features.
Yeah. He's a British film director. He made
WRIGHT or R.
Yeah. He made Shaun of the Dead, Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah.
And then like that latest Mad Max movie, Fury Road, that came out a few years ago. A lot of reporting was about how they also used eye tracing to try and like speed up the edits. But even then, you can only make it so fast before it's just nonsense. And I think if there was a movie I really remember where people kind of like people finally started pushing back and being like, I'm sorry, but this is like meaningless flashing, was the Tony Scott movie Domino. That's the one that I remember audiences, because I actually worked in a movie theater at the time, and audiences were coming out and like, I didn't see anything. It was like a bunch of green flashes, like, and so there's a limit. There's a physiological limit to what we can take.
And the hidden question really, Dane, is, can humans literally multitask?
I'm going to say yes and no. I mean, I wasn't thinking about breathing until I started talking about it now, but we can breathe and eat at the same time. No. In terms of our, what's called, that whole first system 1, system 2 thinking, the attentive, the Daniel Kahneman stuff, the attentive part of your life, you have to focus on one thing. And people who claim that they multitask aren't actually doing that. They're just fragmenting their tasks into smaller spaces.
I'm curious how you formed your framing aesthetic. this is an aspect ratio. What informed your framing aesthetic?
That's I love that question so much because I was starting to take photographs and having a hard time with them. I found that photography was harder than film for a little bit for me because it wasn't as loose. You had to get everything in frame, and there couldn't be things poking into frame that didn't belong there, kind of stuff. And after taking photos for a couple of years like that, I was watching some, I don't know, horror movie or some German expressionist film, and I was like, I know I never do those weird canted angles and stuff. Everything's always all squared off. And I've just discovered over time that I like squaring things off. I'm like pivoting this camera actually on my knee, and I keep trying thing. I actually got it a few times before, but now it's a little too off. But yeah, I don't know. I like things really, really balanced and squared off. It's just the way I like things.
It's the way you like it, because when I asked Bruce Bailey this question in Ann Arbor, he says Jean Cocteau said we form our framing aesthetic the way you put your knife and fork down on a table like this. And I think it's basically from the way we've seen photographs and paintings framed for many, many years. So it leads to that question about the human gaze. I don't know if you saw Nina Mencken's film called Brainwash. So she talks about the male gaze in Hollywood. And then John Berger was one of the first to really bring it up, and he called it the human gaze in the ways of seeing. So, I'm just curious because I'm really fond of a documentary on Alice Guy Blanchet, who was this female who started filmmaking with Méliès, and then she got blackballed out of cinema history. And did she have a female gaze, or was she raised with seeing paintings and photographs by males before her, or did she distinctly have what's called the female gaze? Because I'm curious how you deal with this word gaze and what is the origin. Did the human invent the gaze, or is that something innate in humans?
I would say humans invented the gaze insofar as the gaze is a linguistic concept. And so if you have the technology of language, then they use that technology to discuss a concept called the gaze versus looking or seeing. And every now and then I think to myself, I should try like pushing things differently. I feel like I'm not very creative actually in terms of framing. I just want to get the framing right. But anytime I do that like push and do something different, I kind of look at it, I'm like, I don't like it.
Yeah, it's interesting because Robert Frank started shooting photographs where they were framed a little different, and Cassavetes, his camera starts falling on the floor during a scene, and you're like, wait a minute, what's happening?
Well, I have another little anecdote for you. I took one architecture class, and I really wish I had taken more because it was one of the more like challenging and pushing classes that I've ever taken. And the guy who was teaching it, he talked about design through other media as well, and he started showing his photographs. And the funny thing is, I don't know why he did this. He was a little weird. He showed this photograph he took of a chicken where he was like right up. He was like ground level, pointing upwards at this chicken. Everything was canted. It was crazy. And it was this amazing shot because the chicken was just looming large. It was like really like this really freaky chicken, just right in your face chicken. And I was like, that shot is amazing. And he was like, I showed this. He's like, I wanted to show you this to show you an example of a photograph that you shouldn't take. This is a bad photograph because it doesn't have the thing, da, 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 da. And I was sitting there like, wait, is this happening? Like he really is going to be telling people that this is a bad shot. And then like somebody actually raised their hand and was like, actually, I kind of like it because it's like really visually striking. Like immediately I saw it. It was like, yo, this chicken's crazy. I like looking at this chicken. He's like, exactly. That's the thing. Just because it's like striking, just because it has that initial like thing that makes you think that it's good, doesn't mean that it's good. And I was like,
that's funny, Dane, because McLuhan reinvented Winston Churchill's aphorism, we shape our buildings, then they shape us. And McLuhan just said, oh, we shape our tools, then they shape us.
Yeah, absolutely. So
it is interesting. And I loved when we were talking about tools because you brought up activism. Like you can use Jean-Luc Godard told Michael Moore that Fahrenheit 9/11 was going to help Bush get elected. Now, it didn't help Bush get elected per se, but it galvanized pro-Bushers. It's just like,
my uncle said that. My uncle was, was a conservative Republican. And he was like, I didn't even really, I was feeling iffy about reelecting Bush. And I went ahead and voted for him anyway, but I think he got more votes or he got more enthusiasm because of Michael Moore's documentary.
Yeah. So the basic question is, with this slew of political activism documentaries, do they more activate or more pacify?
You know what? Pass. I don't watch a lot of them, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I actually haven't felt like documentaries have been so political recently. They've been a lot more like, let's find a cool story in a remote location. Even a friend of mine made a documentary about a guy who bought an ice cream store in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And in the parking lot of that ice cream store that he bought was a Confederate flag. And literally the little tiny circle that the Confederate flag was in, that was the only land that this like Sons of the Confederates or whatever owned. And these were people who argued that, the Confederacy was part of their, family history. It doesn't have to do with racism. It doesn't have to do whatever and whatever. And so my friend Emily went and made this really nice documentary about how there was this ice cream owner who's like, listen, this is my business. I don't want their Confederate flag flying here. And then the Sons of the Confederates being like, listen, this is our culture and it's our land. So you're just going to have this here. And the battle that they had, the legal battle that they had. But, even though it was political, it didn't feel like Michael Moore political, it didn't feel like advocacy, like here's a thing that you're supposed to do. Here's like, for more information, call this hotline in order to learn more, or understand more, join this party or that party.
It wasn't agenda ridden.
It just was like, look, here's how people can come together and end up in contrary sides and the clash of their values. And then let's see what comes out of it as they like communicate with each other. Are they going to find middle ground? Are they going to it was a really great documentary.
Well, that's like Battle of Algiers, one of the greatest films ever made, which is basically a fake documentary. Bush used it as a training film, and the Black Panthers used it as a training film. And when they asked Gilo, what does your film do? He says, teaches people how to make a film.
My former boss, Topaz Adizes, he wanted to become a filmmaker because he saw that movie, and he considers every movie to be a mixture of documentary and narrative. And he mixes the two together a lot. We've talked a lot about that movie.
Beautiful. And the other one that did that, I just interviewed him with all these questions. John Ellis, he teaches Berkeley documentary for 30, 40 years. He made The Day After Trinity, which is Oppenheimer's a big film, and this is the film of Oppenheimer documentary wise. He said the good guys used Day After Trinity and the bad guys, both sides used it. So Utah Phillips said that anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Who is entitled to make the rules? I don't know. I'm kind of a classic liberal Democrat in that regard, that we grew as our societies grow. We create organizations that we, institutions, and we defer to those institutions the rulemaking capabilities up to the point where they work for us. And then if they don't, then the institutions start to go into decline.
Well, there's a socialist who said, where the people fear the government, you have tyranny. Where the government fears the people, you have liberty. In 2005, V for Vendetta paraphrased it. People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. How do you personally handle false fears, like the war on drugs? You can't have a war on drugs because drugs don't fight, and you can't say no to drugs because drugs don't talk. This false fear, like war on drugs, war on poverty, war on terrorism. How do you personally handle false fears?
Well, I want to say two things to that. One is that I don't think people should fear their government, and I don't think government should fear the people. I think they should work together.
Yeah.
There are four pillars: government, there's the government, there's businesses, there's the people, and there's the media. And you need all four to be robust and to operate in their own. They all need agency, and they all, kind of checks and balances thing. I don't really like all that kind of like will to power fear,
Yeah.
Oh, we need to kick these guys out because they should be afraid of us as people. Like, that stuff just doesn't get people anywhere. What was the other part? V for
Well, how you personally handle false fears?
I mean, that stupid phrase about God give me the ability to change what I can.
Yeah.
Accept the things that I can, to know to know the difference. Like, if you don't have agency or whatever, I guess I'll answer it like this. When the pandemic started hitting, I saw, China shut down, and then I saw Italy shut down, and Britain was on its way to shutting down. And so I was like, look, this is what's happening. So if it hits here, things are going to shut down. And then the first things happened in New York. And so I sent a message to my wife and I said, hey, I'm going to go out. I'm going to buy some like toilet paper, beans, and like whatever, in case we're locked in our apartment for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
And she said, yes, good idea. So I went and I did that. And then things got bad, and I still had a job. I had plenty of resources, and I had my wife for company. So we were pretty much fine. Like, it was still a struggle, but honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal. And so I outright put the call out to my friends. And I said, if you guys need help, reach out to me, because I'm in a place where I can support and help you. So I didn't really do much politically, but I did buy groceries for artists that were struggling around New York. I actually one time helped a friend of mine, a fellow, filmmaker, who had moved to LA like literally right beforehand and just had no money. And so I paid a month of rent for that filmmaker. And my cat sitter was struggling at one point. So I sent some money to my cat sitter. And then whenever nobody needed money, I just found like those little like public pools or whatever. And that got me through it. You could like have big arguments like, oh, here's how we change the world. Here's how we go out. We change our government. Here's how we fight. Here's how we blah, blah, blah. And I'm kind of in the point of my life where it's the airline thing. Make sure that you put on your own mask and the oxygen is flowing before you help the person beside you.
Yeah.
Other than that, you can't land the plane. So
yeah. Well, how do we keep our governments from going to war?
you're not going to be able to keep your governments from going to war. I mean, there's people are stupid enough to do it, so they're just going to do it. So you make sure that you're not the soldier, you know, you decline to participate, and you make sure that you put your attention towards the people who are suffering and are victims of the war who aren't the soldiers.
Yeah.
You know, you try and figure out how to help the refugees, you know, the children. But yeah, like, what am I going to do to stop the government from going to war? I can't do that. What I can do is make sure that my focus is on helping, not aiding in the war itself.
It's good, Dane. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
I mean, I actually, they go together, and that's actually one of the reasons why I don't like people complaining about, like, oh my God, the government, these people that we put to Congress compromised. Like, no, like, there has to be compromise. I think the issue is that people think that people are compromising their values when oftentimes they're not even compromising their values. They're just compromising on an agreement. And those are two different things. So you have to have conviction in order to compromise. And a person with conviction knows how to compromise. And people who think that there's a distinction between those where they can't, like, be together at the same time are stupid. They're stupid. Sorry, you are getting me riled up because you're talking about politics.
Dane, I appreciate all your input, and I appreciate your passion in doing this with me. And you're also a great listener. You really listen, so I appreciate this. In your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition? What's played the biggest role, second and third?
I would say ambition, skill, then luck.
Yeah.
Because the ambition is what forced me to really try to get to know people and try to get in film, etc. And then people recognized that I could do things and then started hiring me. And then that provided opportunities, in which case I could look out and find the opportunities, and that's the luck. And that is probably even specifically the case of the first major job that I got, where I went to the Middle East to work for a couple of years. It was almost literally that. The guy who hired me, I met on a film set because I specifically reached out to be on that film set. And then he hired me. He asked for my help on a couple of his own productions in Albuquerque because I showed up and because I worked, and so that's the skill part. And then he got the job in the Middle East, and he couldn't hire anybody else because they needed three things. They needed to have a degree in order to get the work visa. They needed to have a passport in order to get there. And they needed to be okay dealing with paramilitary stuff, which many people in the film industry are liberal and wouldn't, right? And so that's the lucky part, is that nobody else in Albuquerque that this guy knew had those three things. They, were either okay working out there, but they didn't have the degree, or they had the degree but they didn't have the passport, etc. So it's all three.
Yep. What was the motive of the cave artist? Your hunch or guess?
Oh God. Hold on. What's the term? What is the term when you see stars and then you get shapes out of it? Or you look at, like, I think art developed out of, I want to say a type of boredom, but it's not boredom. It's more like if you're sitting there in a cave and you've eaten and the fire's flickering and you see these shapes on the walls and you're like, hey, those shapes look like the things that we went out and hunted. Look. And then you like get like some charcoal and you start being like, it's right here. And you're pointing it out. And then it's in the shape of the thing. And then from there, they learn how to draw. I think it kind of came
like
out of
reverberation or an echo, or like an acid dripping where you see traces.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the term is for when you see shapes or faces and things that aren't there. Whatever.
Hypnagogic? You mean the brackage line hypnagogic or whatever that is?
That's not what I'm thinking about.
Okay, well, anyways, T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
This.
That's good. This.
My voice. Me talking. Lecturing.
Good.
Yeah, it's terrible.
George Manu, I don't know. I don't think it's terrible. I'm enjoying it. I'm learning a lot. I thank you, Dane. George Manupelli, his mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mika said, there is no self-expression. Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, environments, and cultures are dominant?
Yeah. I can't speak for other people. I feel like it's more self-expression for me.
Yeah.
I'm just interested. The taste thing. I'm interested in things. I start pointing the camera at the things that I'm interested in and say, hey, look, this is interesting. And because I pointed the camera at the thing and said that it's interesting, that is. And then some people are going to say, no, it's not. It's not interesting at all. And I'm like, okay, then you're not my audience. And then other people are going to say, oh, that is interesting. I'm like, then I have more.
Yeah. Can art making be egoless?
Probably not. Nah.
Is perception reality?
I think you asked that last time, but I also have a feeling like you purposefully asked that multiple times during the.
I did it by mistake. Yeah, I don't want to repeat. So I have a script that, and sometimes when I do a part two, I try not to jump. So I apologize. Yeah.
Our perception is how we navigate reality. I'll leave it at that.
That's good. McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, saying that artists dream awake. And not to sound elitist, but everybody has this power to create these scenarios in the middle of the night. But artists kind of also can dream awake. Have dreams played a role in your creative process?
Absolutely. One of my, I've made short films out of my dreams. So easily. I actually, even at one time, a filmmaker friend of mine, Atoje, was like, wait, so you just had a dream and you just sat down and started making a movie out of it? I was like, yeah, don't you?
Well, briefly describe a dream that you recall.
Well, one of them that I'm working on is the stroke dream, which I had about a year ago, actually, where I was kind of in a maze where there were video panels playing, but they were stacked 5 deep. And if you looked at them straight on, all 5 video panels would make a complete image. But on the side, they just looked like random swirls. And I went through and I was looking for something. And then I came near the center of the cave and then I had a stroke, which was this field of extremely violent light and shadow kind of strobing at me. And I thought somebody was trying to erase my mind. And then I woke up and I freaked out. And
Whoa. Yeah. You mean, did you say erase your mind?
Yeah. Because in the dream, I remembered a time that I worked at Hastings and this guy told me that he was a lawyer and that he must have gotten too close to the truth because they one night wiped his mind.
Wow.
And he decided that he wasn't ever going to try and figure out what the truth is anymore. He didn't want to like learn any more law. He didn't want to know anything deep because he was afraid that they would attack him again. So he spent the rest of his life just trying to find like mindless entertainment and stuff. And I told my mother about that, and she said it sounded like he had a stroke. And so that whole thing was in my head while this field of light was coming at me, and I thought that they, were trying to wipe my mind. And
Yeah.
then I was worried that I was having a stroke.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Yeah, unfortunately, I struggle with the fact that I always think that I believe in truthful, factual things, which I really try to remember is not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me one major element of your creative process, your creativeness, that's changed, and one major element that stayed the same in the years you've been doing it.
Absolutely, a really big deal for me before was trying to plan everything in advance and make the writing precious, and everything had to be great, and everything had to be perfect, and the best idea and so on. And then I just finally was like, I'm not getting anything done. I'm just gonna have to wing it and learn to appreciate that things kind of have their limitations, and I need to get stuff out. And as a result, I've made a lot more stuff than I ever have before. I used to take an entire 2 or 3 years to make one 2-minute, 3-minute video, and now I make 4 or 5 a year while doing bigger projects. But the general idea of what I'm trying to do hasn't changed at all. Write narrative scripts, do experimental films on the side. In fact, I actually a few years ago kind of realized I haven't been doing the thing that a lot of editors try and do, where they're like, "Oh, you have to keep up with the new tools, you have to learn new techniques, and all that kind of stuff." And I realized, I haven't been I've kind of just settled, into my techniques and my skills, and I keep getting hired for it. It hasn't been uncompetitive. So,
There you go. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
I care too much. I'm kidding. That's a weakness that I've turned into strength. Yeah, that's such an interview question. It's such a job interview question. I'm going to pass it just out of scorn.
That's totally fine.
Sorry.
Phil, don't be sorry. It's totally fine. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. I am kind of an anger, what is it called? Rageaholic. So most of the time it's more about controlling it and suppressing it. It's more dangerous for me to use than not, but it definitely used to be a nice, strong pool of creativity for much of my life. The problem is that if you rely on anger to be your source of creativity, then you have to keep the anger going. It's a very bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it can definitely be a source of creative output.
I asked my friend who wrote comedy with Robin Williams, can satire be destructive? He said, that's the job of satire. But if me or you do a comic in a certain country and they kill us, some people think dying is destructive. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
Well, yeah, it's supposed to be destructive. It's supposed to destroy your preciousness. It's supposed to confront your assumptions about a thing and make you it points out that some of our behaviors and some of our values and some of our beliefs and some of our culture and some of our ways of doing things are completely arbitrary is the nice way to say it, right? Because there's the thing about like, there's always somebody who's like, oh, money doesn't exist, and you're like, yeah, but it works. Language doesn't exist, but we seem to be working well with it, right? So there's always going to be arbitrary, weird, strange, absurd things that humans do that work. But satire's purpose is to point out that it is absurd, because if you think that it's not absurd, if you think that it's like real, if you think money is real, then you'll actually be very taken advantage of and have less agency over your own decision making.
What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
I'm going to pass that one.
Yeah.
I'm not really interested. The thing is it's not even about putting me on the spot on it. I'm not interested in that kind of.
No, it's the answer I most want to get, Dane. I love when people say there is no difference, but that's fine. What caused matriarchy?
What caused matriarchy?
Yeah.
I feel again that we covered some of these questions before, right? But
if you did, we can. I've got a million. Yeah. We can pass if we already did that.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it was something. We talked about patriarchy versus matriarchy, and I think it came to something about like, well, if someone is the life giver, you should pay attention to that.
Yeah.
To the power and dominion that has over your life. Like, why not?
Life giver is a good term. Yeah, that's birth, nature, nurture. So there's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. Any thoughts on this line, you create what you resist? I'm not saying you, Dane, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Yeah, no, I agree. No, that's a big one for me. I'm not an atheist because that involves believing too much in God. And it's too much work.
Yeah.
And also, yes, there's the, even in the political situation where like basically, at this point, the Democrats need Trump to win, which is the worst way to be able to run a party, right? That kind of stuff. And I do see that, especially in social media, even politics aside, a lot of the social media is like, nobody says the word problematic anymore, but say back in the day, the word was problematic. They'd say, that's problematic. You should do this. This is problematic. They should do that. And by doing that, they always like made new things, new concepts that they then, after making, pointed out everywhere in society. And then once it was everywhere in society, then everything around that thing, then anybody who is involved with that is going to constantly reinforce it, even if they're reinforcing it from the perspective of resisting it or arguing against it or trying to change it.
Yeah, that's evokes Duchamp said there's no solution because there's no problem. So as soon as you, yeah. So Hollis Frampton said narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
Nope. Good luck.
How do you find peace of mind?
Oh, that's easy. I just choose to.
Just what?
Just choose to.
Just choose.
I mean, I lose control sometimes. I'll like read news or do something and get riled up, talk talk my wife or my mother's or colleagues ear off about something, but then like other points I'm just like, all right, listen, I need to
You mean you know how to chill out?
I know how to chill out.
Yeah.
Maybe other people who know me would disagree because I get amped up really easily. I have that anger issue I told you about, but in the end,
yeah,
I can do it.
These are 5 Alan Watts questions just off the top of your head in a couple words.
Okay.
1, who started it all?
You did.
2, are we going to make it?
Yes.
3, where do we put it?
Online.
4, who's cleaning it up?
I am.
5, is it serious?
No.
Really good, Dane. We got about 15 more minutes, a few more, and we're out of here. Thank you again. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Excuse me. Right now I'm just on the level of like, you're pretty much going to do what you want. Like, most of the things that you want to do are going to happen. So go ahead. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I'm here. Actually, the funny thing is, if I really wanted to troll him, I'd be like, do you know you're going to live in New York City when you grow up? Because around that age, I thought that I would never live in a big city or like be involved with like anything industrial or whatever.
Yeah.
And at the age of 12, I legitimately thought that I was going to grow up to be a hippie and live off the land and, be away from crowds and all that kind of stuff. So that would have blown little 12-year-old Dane's mind. You're going to live in New York City and you're going to like it. You're going to enjoy yourself.
Beautiful. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over. No, not with that under and back thing. No, over.
That's the picture on the patent is that way, and 90% of people say over. So
yeah, but honestly, it feels like most people do it the other way because I always have to fix it all the time.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Boy. My autobiography. What do I want to tell people about? Destructures.
I like that. They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Oh, nice. Lavender.
Beautiful. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed, and what would it be made of?
Albuquerque, because that's where I'm from. I mean, around outside of Albuquerque. Should be copper because that is the medium that my father most liked to work with as a sculptor. What was the third part of that?
That's it. The material would be made of and where. Very good.
Yeah.
Tell me.
And it wouldn't be figurative. It wouldn't be like my face or anything. Right. It'd have to be abstract.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good that I've never had and I never want?
Yeah.
Oh boy. I feel like there's a lot of luxury stuff that exists in the world that I'm like just simply not interested in. Beachfront property.
It's a good answer. The answer I get the most is fame, money, and heroin.
Yeah. I mean, heroin, is that good? It feels
I know.
Good. Yeah.
Well, not beachfront. It's all. If you answered it, okay, Dane. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Well, it doesn't seem like I have much agency in that situation to do much, do I? Like, if I'm in a situation where that's happening, I'm not in control of the situation, but I would probably just try and get through it. I'd like, try not to breathe, or breathe very slowly, and hopefully try and get out. I don't know.
What does freedom mean to you now? And I'll just set it up. The etymologically, the word freedom breaks down to the same as anarchy. What Utah Phillips said: giving oneself one's own laws.
Yeah.
T.S. Eliot said, freedom is only truly freedom when it appears against the background of an artificial limitation, which caused McLuhan to say, how are you to argue with people who insist on sticking their heads into the invisible teeth of technology, calling the whole thing freedom? What does freedom mean to you now?
So to go back to V for Vendetta, I really love the term that V uses in it, where he says, we'll return to the land of do as you please.
Yeah.
However, of course, there's always the issue of like, can you do as you please if you're harming other people, the harm principle, etc. So return to the land of think as you please.
To do as you please, and you're morphing it into think as you please.
Yeah. Freedom is the land of think as you please.
Yeah, it's good. Brakhage introduced Tarkovsky in '83 at Telluride. He says, I personally think the three greatest tasks for film in the 20th century are: one, to make the epic that tells the tales of the tribes of the world; two, to keep it personal, because only in the eccentricities of our personal lives do we have any chance at the truth; three, to do the dream work, that is to illuminate the borders of the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
What are your updates? Any updates on those three tasks for film?
I love all three. I work mostly in the third one with a lot of interest in the second one, but a lot of what I want people to watch more of is the first one. Like I write movie recommendations, and I like insist they are recommendations. They're not reviews. I am writing them so that to tell people to go see these movies. And almost always they end up being like little American independent movies that are about a community, like a little American community. And they matter.
Yeah, you cut off there for a second.
Are we good?
Good, we're back. Very good. Yeah, you cut off for a second. So the last thing we heard is that they matter, that the films matter.
Yeah. The epic movies for all the tribes matter. I'm not great at them because I'm not a realist artist. But dreams also matter, and I am a surrealist artist. So there you go.
Dane, what's the cultural shift developing today that inspires you?
I like Zoomers a lot. They have a good sense of humor and a great sense of color and fashion, and they seem to really appreciate absurdist art. And I'm all about it, and I hope it lasts. It probably won't, because nothing lasts. Everything changes, etc. But like the stereotype of an A24 film is, some dude or some kids go insane and weird shit happens, and then a animal dies, and then whatever, and that's meant to be derogatory to that production company's style. But I'm for it. I'm all for it. All these like weirdo flicks and crazy things. Meme like the memeology of the internet now actually turned into art. I don't like memes particularly, but I like the visual play, and yeah.
Yeah, it's a great word. What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Whether I should even expend so much energy or time uh, towards large scale commercial production, because it's just a lot of work,
Yeah,
effort, and it's very competitive. And it's more like there are movies that I want to make, but I actually am kind of unclear about wanting to be a director, like there's specifically movies I want to make. That's the thing. But like, other than wanting to make those movies, I'm not particularly interested in making movies.
yeah, gotcha. Beautiful. How has filmmaking shaped your behavior?
Well, I definitely had the point where I got annoyed actually with being around filmmakers all the time and hearing filmmaking stuff and everything, living in that world. So I definitely like learned to have different parts, have a personality. But yeah, it's hard not to think about turning everything into a movie, or seeing light and being like, oh, I'm actually at a resort, and immediately upon looking at the resort, I was like, horror movie. I can make a horror movie here. This place is perfect. The space is amazing for horror. Over there, that's where some teenager will be shoved off into the water. Over there, that's a dark corner. Like it just like yeah.
Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You laid your cards on the table for hours now. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
What's that Barton Fink quote? I'll show you the life of a mind. I don't know.
This is wait. Barton Fink said what?
So the movie is Barton Fink.
Yeah.
I'll show you the life of a mind. It's a joke, actually. This Barton Fink, the writer, wants to show the life of a mind, but he's talking to a working class John Goodman, who tries to tell these stories, and the writer won't listen to his stories. And then John Goodman burns down the hotel and goes charging at him and says, "Oh, I'll show you the life of a mind." But anyway,
okay.
I used to sit in my room and stare at the corner and wonder how I could express what it felt like to be sitting and see depth and all that kind of stuff. And anything that I've really been interested in film has always been about recreating that experience.
Yeah. That's interesting. Have you ever studied this guy, James Turrell, the light artist?
No.
Well, check him out. He's making like the most long-lasting, biggest piece of art somewhere there in New Mexico, Arizona. It's a crater. And basically his art form is he would just show slide projectors with no slide in them on a wall. He's a light artist. So it reminded me of you just staring at sort of light in a room, what gives you the most optimism?
Yeah, I'm like a optimistic cynic or optimistic pessimist. I just figure things will work out, and if it doesn't, it's not going to matter, because if it doesn't work out, then nothing matters.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hey, that's
and honestly, my life is too good to get all upset. Like, I work, I do art, I have a loving relationship with my wife. We're moving forward in the future We have some, worries and anxieties about it, but like I'm mostly gung ho, go ahead. And yeah.
How many years you been together?
2017, so 6.5.
How do you explain the longevity?
I don't know. I mean, it's easy to say we love each other, but even then, it's also really easy to get along with her. She's amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and like we've got, she moved in with me right before the pandemic, and so that's the big thing during the pandemic. Lots of people got married, or lots of people broke up.
Yeah.
She moved in, and it was like, are we going to be able to live together? And we really lived together, and it really, really wasn't a problem at all, honestly. So
great. The first question in part one was from Wilhelm Reich. What's the best thing for a human being? He said, another human being. The last question, what gives you the most optimism? That's what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he says, other people. It's sure been a great spending time with another person, especially because it was you, Dane. Thank you so much for your time and energy, man.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope this never ends. We can keep talking forever and ever.
Well, I do need to get back to the resort, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, Dane. Thanks a lot.